You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers. So, hello and welcome to the Stacked Podcast episode number 59, recorded on May 27th, 2022. My name is Kito Man, and I'm here today with two of our three other co-hosts, Josh Juno and Daniel Hinojosa. Hey, guys.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing okay.
Hello.
Hey, so what have you guys been up to?
Way too much. But
very specific.
Yeah. Well, I went to DevNexus and I got COVID because I was doing a podcast for our cousin podcast, which I forgot the name. What's the name of it, Josh? You're in that podcast.
That would be Off Heap.
So Off Heap, there we go. Yeah.
Yep.
I was doing a Off Heap, and oh man. So here's a little bit of information about me. I get judgy. I get very strict. Like if I put my mind to something, I'm really strict to the point where my hypocrisy will come shining through at some particular point. That's the way I live my life. It's not that I choose it that way. It's just the way that life tends to do things. So when COVID came out, like, even my partner, she was like, can I bring my mom over in 2020? And I'm like, no. Now should not bring mom over because mom will get sick or I get sick or something's going to happen. And so I was like thoroughly strict. But then, I told everyone, this is the way my life goes. I'm strict about something, but it's going to come at me, and it's going to come at me in the most spectacular spectacle that is possible. So lo and behold, it was an Off-Heap podcast, and there was a particular point in the video where I suspect that's the moment that I got COVID. When I got COVID, it's on video.
Really?
Yeah. And I just knew something spectacular had to happen. What's that?
And now I have to go watch the video.
Yeah, and there's one point because I suspect it was Matt Rabel. I can't prove it. And I told Matt, look, I don't know if it was you. This was a big conference. I was in bars and I was in a few other places. So there's probably 15% chance it was from this particular episode. But I'm sitting next to Matt Rabel. And he says a quote on there in a particular spot in the video. Well, I feel like I have COVID right now, but I tested negative. And it was just like, oh. And we were kind of laughing, haha, but not like, hey, that's hilarious. But we're like, And it could very well be, I don't know, I guess 15%, 20% chance that was the exact moment that I got COVID. And it was on video, so fantastic. I think Freddie got infected as well. So
oh, really?
He got infected, yeah.
Okay.
Billy Corando from Oracle got infected, and a few others. And this took place in April last month.
Yeah, and that was after the spike in the States.
Yeah, so there was, and you know what? I was wearing masks, but I'm not going to do a podcast with a mask, and I knew what I was doing. So there were times where I'm running a risk, and I knew this thing could probably happen. When I landed at the airport, I had double mask because I didn't want to affect anyone while riding on the airplane. It could be that I shouldn't have been riding on an airplane, but I did it anyway. But double masked up and just want to make sure that, But I suspected I was testing negative and came home, tested negative. And that's the thing about COVID, why it's so dangerous, is that the first 2 or 3 days you're testing negative because it's not there yet. But, after that, that's when it starts to show up. I was pretty nervous. Doctor gave me Paxlovid, which I think helped out a lot. The vaccines helped out a lot. I was really just only sick for a half a day, one evening. And, but then I was carrying the virus for about 2 weeks. But
gotcha.
That's my story.
Wow. You're making me little paranoid about planning to actually go to conferences again in the fall.
You know what? I'll just say, if you're going to a conference, you're likely going to get, or you're going to run a good chance of getting COVID. Now, I'm not saying that to be mean, but everyone calculate your own risk and just go ahead and assume that's going to be that risk. Conference is equal to COVID, and
that's a lovely sentiment.
I mean, just go with that. But you go to a conference knowing a risk, and as long as you're aware of that, and that's why, like, if I'm doing a talk, if I'm talking with friends, if I'm talking with family, I'll wear a mask. If I'm using the restroom, or I won't wear a mask with friends, family, or if I'm doing a talk. But if I'm using the restroom or something else like that, I'm going to put a mask on. I'd hate to get sick just for doing something stupid.
I've pretty much decided, even if I'm at a place where I'm not really wearing a mask because it's like really open or stuff, when I go in the bathroom, I'm like, bathrooms are gross and stink anyways.
Yeah, I know.
So I might as well put on a mask when I go there.
Yeah, you don't want to get So run your own risk. Anyways, that's what I did, and then plus do my regular job and other things like that. That's what's been going on. But that was the highlight since we last talked.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling well. I think since our podcast, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law had it, and so did my mother and father-in-law. And but the older ones, I specifically said you guys should take that I can never pronounce it, but Paxil.
Paxlovid.
Yeah, I told them because they're both high risk and old, they're 70s. Yeah. And I think they got through it okay too. So, but they're all those people are vaccinated and mostly boosted. So,
I surpassed 50 years of age, so now that was
so now
one of the strikes.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't want to go on about this too long, but my brother had it over the holidays. He was supposed to be coming. He actually lives in Moscow.
Right.
Sorry there, but
mentioned that last time that he was in Moscow. Yeah.
But he got it before he came, and they delayed the trip by like a week or two. And then he got it again, like a month later or a month or two later. And I'm like, and he'd had like two different vaccines because the US doesn't accept the Sputnik vaccine from Russia.
Right.
And he'd been boosted, but it all depends on, but also he was at a conference actually.
There it is. Conference is equal to COVID.
Yeah,
I was at a
conference. So yeah. Yep. All right, let's move on. Move on from the joy of COVID. Josh, what have you been up to?
I have not had COVID lately. That's good. I did have it over Christmas time, but that's okay. That's all done and everybody's okay. Other than regular, working, my regular schedule, things are going well with work, keeping busy, of course. And then kids are now home for the summer. So that's an exciting time.
Oh, wow. All right.
And loud time. It's interesting, but since I've got a whole brood of kids, it's always louder around the house. But it's good to be home with them, and other than that, just trying to get with the seasons, getting the yard in shape and all that good stuff.
Oh yes, all the fun real life stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I actually have slowly gotten into gardening. We live in suburbia. We've been here for this house for 7.5 years, and this whole time, our yard has been the most boring yard in our little suburban neighborhood because we planted a few trees and that's it. And my in-laws are super gardeners. Their yard is beautiful. It's and for some reason this spring I suddenly got interested. I actually dug up a flower bed and created a flower bed and planted all these little trees, and I got this little app that lets me keep track of my plants and lets me identify plants by using machine learning to any picture, and you take a picture of any plant you want and figure out what it is.
Is the app called Seek?
No, this one's called Picture This or something.
Got it.
But it's cool because once you take the picture of that, once it figures out the plan, it's you want to add this to your garden. I'm like, sure, So I've gotten kind of into it. So I understand now the
nice.
The whole deal. Other than that, it's been a little while since our last podcast. I am still working a lot with Okta and Capacitor, which I think I was talking to Matt Rabel about in our last podcast, and React, strangely. So that project should be wanting to get on soon. But we're still doing a lot of or some Java, JSF consulting and things like that as well. Cool. So, I've also been working on a side project I keep teasing. I think I'll probably have something to talk about for hopefully the next month. So stay tuned on that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest. If you're watching the video, you've been watching her patiently sit here and not say anything. So I'd like to welcome Holly Cummins, who's the Senior Principal Software Engineer on the Quarkus team at Red Hat. Big mouthful there. So welcome, Holly. Very, very happy to have you here. She's also a fellow Java champion as well.
Thank you. Yeah, after all this talk about COVID and podcasts, I'm sort of like, normally I'm not glad something's virtual, but I'm feeling glad that this one's virtual, even though you're all very nice.
Yes, I totally understand. So very happy to have you. You are another fellow Java champion, keynote speaker. That's actually where I've seen you. Is at I guess I saw you at God knows which conference it was. It was back when there were actually conferences, more conferences in person. Let me put it that way. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I've been watching you on Twitter recently. I know you recently switched from IBM to Red Hat.
I did, yeah. I was with IBM for 20 years. So wow. It was it was one of those, because it's one of the sort of the really interesting and nice things about IBM. I think partly because it's such a large company and partly because of the kind of company it is. There's people who stay there for their whole career. And then you get these really sweet sort of multi-generational families as well, where the sort of, the parent will work at IBM and then their children will work at IBM and then their grandchildren will work at IBM. So it was a big jump to leave. But
that was amazing that you had so many years there, because that hasn't been a standard for, I guess, the last 20 years where anyone stays even more than like 5 years at a job. It's just very quick. It's not like the old style of you work somewhere and you retire with the same company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what enabled me to stay for so long was I did so many different things, and I've been in so many different teams, and I've, worked in different cities and had completely different sorts of roles. So I could sort of have that variety while still being in that sort of overall embrace of that corporate culture.
I think that's what I hear even about companies like Google and stuff. There's just if they enable you to bounce around, they can actually, I think the retention rate is a lot higher for companies like that.
It's a smart move for the company.
Yeah. And, I actually, when you say that story about the IBM generational thing, one of my father's college roommates was an IBMer, and so is his wife. He did storage system and she did mainframe compiler stuff or something. But their son actually worked at IBM for a long time. And they're like, he's doing the family, family vocation or whatever, and going to work at IBM. So
you should get some sort of referral bonus.
Yes, that's awesome. So we jumped ahead a bit, but just tell us a little bit about yourself for those who have not heard of Holly Cummins before.
So I think we've covered some of it. So I'm a Java champion, 20 years at IBM. Now I'm at Red Hat. So I've been at Red Hat for about 2 months. So I'm all sort of starry-eyed and learning lots of new things, which I think probably for all of us, that's the best thing about a job, isn't it? Yes. Is that sort of opportunity to learn, and everything is different and everything is cool, and it's sort of, I didn't know how to do this, and I didn't know how to do this, and I haven't used that. So it's all quite exciting in a kind of overwhelming, I don't know anything kind of way. You have to get the balance right between sort of, this is new, this is rewarding, this is exciting, and I'm an idiot, I don't know anything, I'm overwhelmed, I'm just going to sink into ignorance. So hopefully I'm sort of at the right point of that balance. But I sort of, I've done all sorts of things. So I've been a consultant. I've worked on WebSphere. So I helped build WebSphere Liberty. I've been a Java performance engineer. So I had a tiny part of making OpenJ9 fast back when it wasn't OpenJ9, back when it was just J9.
Right.
And now I'm working on Quarkus.
Nice.
Very cool. Very cool.
Could you fill us in on Quarkus for some of us that don't know?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a terrible feeling, actually, when we were chatting before, that I'm probably the person who knows least about Quarkus in this group. And I'm probably the person who knows least about Quarkus in a lot of groups. Because before I joined Red Hat, I knew about Quarkus and I knew it was really cool, but I wasn't actually a Quarkus user. I sort of, doing quite a different role. But Quarkus, it's a relatively new Java framework, and it aims to sort of solve two problems. And I think there's something really nice at the way it can solve these sort of two problems using the same technology. One is that the way Java used to be run isn't the way we run Java anymore. So it used to be that we'd have a huge on-prem server and we'd start Java up, and then 6 months later, whether it needed or not, we'd stop the JVM. And so in that kind of environment, you can have something that uses a lot of memory because you've already bought the server, and you can have something that takes a long time to start up because you're only starting it really infrequently. But of course, now everything is on the cloud and our instances are much more ephemeral. And ideally, we're looking at programming models like serverless. And so at that point, you need it to not be this sort of workhorse that sits in the corner and stays up. You need it to be like, I was thinking about a light switch the other day. It's something, if you turn your light switch on and then 5 minutes later you get light, you don't care how good the light is. It was too late. And we want that kind of behavior and those kinds of ergonomics now for our JVMs. And we can do it is the cool thing. So the sort of the performance that you get with Quarkus is, every time I look at the numbers, I have to kind of double check that I'm reading them right, because they're just so ridiculous. So, it starts up in milliseconds and it uses, dozens of megabytes for its footprint. And it does that by making certain sort of interesting performance trade-offs, because all performance is trade-offs. And so what Quarkus does is it says we'd really, as a community, we'd gone more and more towards being dynamic. So no matter what you want to do at runtime, you can do it. Do you want to load new classes? You can load new classes. Do you want to, have this annotation? Well, let's scan it at runtime. And if we just sort of push that a little bit more towards deploy time and make a bit more of an investment of time there, then our runtime characteristics are going to be really good. And all of those things that we thought we needed to change at runtime, like realistically, we actually never did, but we were paying a performance penalty for the ability to change them. And so then that sort of comes to the other side of it, which is, wait a minute, if I've just pushed all of this stuff to deploy time, to build time, my developer experience is going to be horrible, right? And so then the other thing that Quarkus looks at is, how can we make it so that it's actually way, way quicker to do the development, and you see your changes instantaneously? And it really is, it took me a while to sort of, I had a few conversations with the team when I joined, because they sort of said, oh, you can do hot code deploy and live coding. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we've been doing that for ages. What's different? Mm-hmm. And I haven't fully got to the bottom of the sort of the technology yet, but the sort of the takeaway that I've got is it's hotter code deploy, it's liver reload. So it's foundationally different from what we used to do before. And so it means you can have this sort of continuous testing, and you can have this sort of continuous coding. And so you have, then they sort of went a little bit further as well. And they said, okay, so we've made it really fast at runtime, and we've made it so that you're not paying a penalty at development time for that speed. And in fact, it's the opposite, because we've kind of got our hooks into what's going on. We can give you a better developer experience. And now let's look at the programming models, because actually some of our developer experience for Java isn't as easy as it could be. And so how can we make it so that it really is just this sort of delightful experience where you just type one line and you're up and going, and you've got your REST app, and you don't have to be there on Google sort of trying to figure out, okay, what annotation do I need, and what library do I put in, and trying to sort of wrestle through this ecosystem that, because it's so mature, had got pretty complex. So how can we provide that sort of simplified on-ramp to Java programming.
I really like that. There's a couple key things that you said there. There's the light switch analogy. I think is really brilliant because I'm the light geek, excuse me, in my house. I manage all the light bulbs, and I actually like it. It's really weird. I even have those Philips Hue lights, not for everything because I'm too cheap, but I have the fancy ones that like change colors and stuff when I'm coding. It's really fun. I always wanted the energy efficient ones, right? So I was really into CFLs for a while. And my wife would complain about them all the time. And, because they say they last 20 years or whatever. And she'd be like, that one died. And I'm like, yes, but it's been there for like 5 years. If it was an incandescent, it would have died like after a few months. Anyways, the point is though, that was the problem with the CFLs, right? Is you turn them on and you'd be like, okay, I'm sitting here, like, where's the light? And, you would wait for it to heat up, right? Yeah. And people notice that. And that's part of, I think, the problem with them is that delay. Now, the benefit you were getting, of course, is that it saved a lot of energy and it lasts a long time, right? But that initial 5 seconds just to get a light was like, what, so that's why people love LEDs because they're instant and they're really energy efficient. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just remembering because I always used to say, don't put it in a stairwell because you'd sort of turn on the light and you'd need to go down the stairs and you wouldn't have any light and you'd be like halfway down the stairs by the time you got the light, at which point it might be too late if there was a child's toy on the stairs.
Yes, I totally get that. So that's a good analogy. The other point I wanted to make is that, I think a lot of, Java in general, a lot of different frameworks are all moving towards, making it really easy to do native deployments or, take advantage of raw VM, faster startup time and everything. But I do think Quarkus definitely has that benefit from what I've seen with the developer experience. And I was thinking of it, to me, it's more like, cause we were all around when JRebel was the thing, right? You had your huge Java app and your huge, application server runtime. And then you want to make a change and not wait an hour for it to redeploy and everything, right? So you had JRebel, which you had to pay for. And I remember convincing clients to use it and everything. And then finally you could actually do a live reload, 70% of the time. And then the other 30% of the time you'd be like, oh, I can't do that. Sorry. And Quarkus reminds me more of a lot of some of the hot reloading servers on the JavaScript side, where, you run it from the command line. It's not something in your IDE that you pay thousands of dollars for, right? And you just make the change in the file system and magically it knows how to deal with it and update everything. And so, not that I've used Quarkus extensively, but the times that I've used it, I felt like that. I was like, oh, I just run the server and voila,
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say, I think it because I've been doing a lot of Node.js programming, and it does feel like that Node.js experience, and it's quite interesting how much it sees as well, and it knows what you've changed, and so then it only has to do that bit. And so today I was sort of hacking around, and I made a bad change to my POM file, and then there it was red, and I was like, really? maybe that was just a coincidence, but no, it had updated from there before I could even realize I'd made a mistake.
Nice.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I thought Liberty Profile had that, didn't it? An automatic reloading.
It did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that's one of the things that I haven't. I wish I knew, because that was my question when I joined too. Was wait a minute, Liberty Profile did this, and we did it ages ago. And I wrote part of it actually, because we would watch the file system, and at the time, to monitor the file system on Mac, the operating system support just wasn't there, so you had to poll, and so then of course that meant that your energy usage and everything was horrible. And so it was okay, well, how do we make this so that it's not polling, which is horrible. And I think this is bringing me back actually, because what it was is if you just called the Java libraries, it would look the same, but under the covers on Mac, it would be polling. But there was a sneaky extra thing that you could do to say, okay, look, no Java library. That is not good enough. I'm going to have to tune this so that we get acceptable behavior. But it did do something similar. I think I think it is different. I think in Liberty we were watching the file system, but we weren't watching it at the bytecode level. Whereas I think Quarkus is watching it at the bytecode level, and it knows your dependencies, and it's got much more of that sort of.
Yes.
I mean, they talk about a closed world, and so that means you can do more things.
Right. That's a good point. This brings me to another question. So this is, I was thinking about this, like you made the transition from IBM to IBM subsidiary, essentially, which, because I always forget that it's still, because they did a good job of still maintaining the brand and everything. So I think there's probably a lot we can talk about with the culture, but first I'm interested in the product line. Like, so, there's the WebSphere, which I've worked a lot on the client, as a consumer of WebSphere 8, 9. I'm actually on a project now where we migrated people to 9 because we couldn't move to Liberty. So, and then there's Open Liberty, which is sort of like, the newer hip thing that all the young kids get. But then there's Quarkus, and
I'm not sure all the kids is
okay. Okay. The companies that
I'm pretty sure like some teenagers are like, whoa, right. Open Liberty is so awesome. This shred.
See, I told you he was the funny one, Holly. Yeah. All right. Fine. Okay. I'm just what I'm getting at, to make a long story short, is
Open Liberty is clearly more modern.
Yes. So how does IBM look at like all the different product lines that are, essentially doing the same thing in different ways? That's a simple.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good question. And I think part of the answer is probably sort of above my pay grade, but I think part of it as well is the sort of like, even within a company, you get these problems, don't you, where you have sort of things that seem to be doing the same thing. And then you need to decide, well, wait a minute, what do we do? Do we keep both and let them, and, every sort of culture has a different approach to it as well. Some companies will deliberately sort of foster that competition where we say we're going to have two teams go head to head, and then the winning product is the winner. Some will sort of try and be more planned. I don't fully know, sort of where IBM sits on that spectrum, and I don't fully know where sort of IBM and Red Hat together sit on that spectrum. I think you're right that IBM have tried really hard to ensure that Red Hat remains its own entity. And I think that's important it's probably important to everybody. There have been a few cases where there's been sort of a product that seemed to make just much more sense in one than another. So like, I think some of the multi-cloud orchestration and management, for example, moved a couple of years ago. It moved from IBM to Red Hat. So there was sort of a consolidation there. But you're right that for some other things, there absolutely hasn't been consolidation. So there's Open Liberty and WebSphere Liberty, and then there's the sort of the JBoss stack. And those are two still quite distinct stacks. Right. They collaborate, but only, I think, to the extent that the whole Java EE ecosystem and community collaborates, so there's the sort of there's the collaboration with everybody in that space because we want to have common standards.
Interesting. That reminds me, what's the deal is, do they still sell JBoss, the old JBoss Enterprise server?
So there's a product called JBoss Enterprise Application Server. Yeah. And then, there's Wildfly. So those are, Wildfly, those are still very much a going concern.
Right.
Wow.
So I have a question. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I know that, I'm not sure if this is the correct time to ask, but we're talking about Quarkus. So if I was to try and get started with Quarkus, I know that there's a page on IDE support and whatnot. Is this something that you would recommend to just go and start to use a command line interface to get used to Quarkus, or is there a specific IDE that offers better support? I know I'm more of a NetBeans guy, and I don't see any NetBeans information on the website, but I do know there is some support because I know Adam Bean has put out a podcast about how to get Quarkus working with NetBeans and whatnot. So cool. I just kind of wanted your opinion on that since you're on the team.
Yeah. And I mean, again, that's probably another one where I'm sort of the worst person to ask, because I haven't, I've sort of had my one little happy path. So what I've been doing is I've been going to code.quarkus.io, and then you just sort of tell it, okay, well, I want a REST application and I want to use Hibernate, and then it'll give you your POM file and it'll give you your structure, and then you can go. And then of course, if you load that into your IDE is like, yep, I know how to deal with this. I haven't tried any of the other paths that are sort of IDE first. And then usually I've been driving it. So when I want to run it, I'm on the command line, so you do Maven Quarkus :dev, and then it will do the continuous testing. So it took me a little while to figure out what it was doing, because it does both the continuous testing and it stands up your runtime for you to manually play with. And I always expect that I have to do two commands for those and have two windows, and it's got the one window is doing both, so you can sort of see your test results and then you can play with it in the browser. But yeah, so basically I don't know. It was a really long way of saying that.
No, that helps. It's good to know that you can pull it down and just get started right away with what you get. You don't have to rely upon an IDE to start up a project or whatever.
Right. I did stumble on this. So if you use SDKman, SDKman has a Quarkus installation, and you can create an application there. I just verified it right now. I've never used it though, so I have no idea how that turns out. But so you can do everything command line based as well.
Okay, so
nice.
With that. Can you add that to show notes? Excuse me, I can talk. Can you add that to the show notes, Danno? The SDK man?
You bet.
Cool. So by the way, show notes, you can get stackedpodcast.com. You can get all the show notes for this and a previous episode. And that's STACD. I'm sorry, STACKD. Yes.
I love that you made a point of spelling it out and you got it wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, isn't it? It's a story of my life. So anyways, so that's you get show notes there. I was just going to say what I like about, I find that modern IDEs are generally pretty good at dealing with you doing half your stuff on the command line these days. So that's one thing that I've found, especially I've been using VS Code a lot lately, and I like it, but its Git support sucks. So I just got to get command line for all that stuff because I can't.
Oh, that's really interesting, actually, because I've just gone in the other direction, and so I'm using IDEA, which I haven't used in the past, and because I always thought the Java support in VS Code, it got better every time I looked at it, but I always thought it wasn't good enough.
Right.
But now that I'm in IDEA, I really miss the Git support from VS Code.
Oh, fascinating.
And I'm like having to go out to the command line, and I'm having to go or actually today I had to fire up VS Code just to use it for something to do with Git.
Oh, it's so funny. Well, looking at it, I'm like, it's super functional, but it's just not intuitive. Because I think I installed the Git Lens plugin or something. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that was the mistake. Different plugin. But that's the problem with VS Code. It's like, I don't want to spend like all this time trying out all these different plugins. It's like I'm too lazy. So I still like IntelliJ a lot. I think I might. I tend to use different IDs for different projects and different parts of projects, but yeah. Anyways, I go on.
I was just gonna say it probably just depends on the workflow you're used to, because NetBeans has great Git support, but I do still go to the command line for some things. Just because I don't want to use the user interface. Yeah. It's easier to go to command line for me in my brain.
Yeah. Well, I used to be the other way around with IntelliJ. I was pretty good with its Git support, but then I was like, I need to actually be able to use the command line for some of these things. I've been a little too spoiled. So
I have this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Holly.
I was going to say, if you sort of listen to this conversation though, and if you were an IDE designer, you'd be like, how do I win? Because clearly there is no right answer. And it is all just, different people have different preferences, and then different people get different habits. And then it just means that you could have the greatest thing and you still have people who go, oh no, it's not for me.
Indeed. Yeah, and I love my IDE. I love IntelliJ, but even like in my classes, I say, you have no idea if it runs unless it runs on the command line. That's your overall judge on whether something's going to work or not. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
IDEs should know they can never win because of command line rules. Because like the IDEs will have like an embedded Maven that throws you off.
It does.
Like, sure, it works in that embedded Maven, like particularly like Eclipse throws you off, because if you have two Maven projects open in the same workspace, then it maps everything for you. But if you attempt to do that on the command line, then it breaks. And so, yeah, there are a few interesting things. So, yeah, command line always wins, or at least that's the way I believe it.
This reminds me of this project. I actually have this presentation on it called like upgrading a legacy Java EE app, because this app that we got running on WebSphere 9 was in WebSphere 7, and it's actually using Jax RPC. If anyone remembers that, and WSDL and all that kind of stuff. But what was hard about the project was that they're like, okay, you need to upgrade this, and it's using some like Ant script running on a Windows server for the build. And we're like, okay, let's put this in Jenkins and automate the build and everything. And I quickly realized that like half of the stuff that was deployed wasn't actually in version control. It was like generated WSDL, generated Java classes from the WSDL that was actually done in the build script. And the reason the developers didn't notice it is because they had rational application developer tooling that was doing all this stuff for them.
Yep.
And this company, this code base was old. They didn't even use Rational. We just used Eclipse with the WebSphere plugins for them. So I basically had to go in and like reverse engineer all of the Ant stuff, get it into Maven, and then get it to work in the build that the developer could run. Because it was Mavenized. But it was like it's really good example of the whole like idea that you should be able to run it on the command line. You should be able to replicate the entire build that's happening wherever on your machine, or at least the important parts that are related to your code.
Right.
And ideally on someone else's machine with a clean checkout, because it's so easy to miss checking things in. And again, sometimes, your tooling doesn't help you with that. And it's like, oh no, you don't need to check that in. I'll just ignore that for you. And it's like, I really wish you wouldn't have.
Yes.
That's funny. Yeah. Totally.
This is a sort of a random tangent, but one of the things that's been bothering me lately is one of the projects that I'm working with. It's a React-based project. I've actually seen some other JavaScript projects where it's like as part of the build, they generate like, all of this code, but you're not supposed to check it in. But it's like, but every time you run it, it generates more of the stuff. And then there's also situations where it generated code, but you kind of need to check it in, which is kind of, it's like, it's funny that there's sometimes that even just that level of tooling gets in the way of the version control system. It's like, I can't really exclude the whole folder because some of the stuff actually is supposed to be checked in, but then you generated like 400 other files, which I just have to look at, and messes up my view of all the files the system's managing. So,
yeah, I've noticed that as well. Actually, that there's sort of, I think we don't think version control first often enough. So, like with tooling, it will mix files that you shouldn't check in and files that you should check in the same folder. And it should be like, no, just make it easy for people. Have two separate folders, because the first thing that they're going to need to do is figure out what they should. Well, you want to make it as easy as possible, and you want to make it a first-class citizen to have things source controlled. And that means not sort of pretending like source control is something that, they may want to do or they may not want to do. It's like, no, they want to do it.
It's a really good point. Like version control first in the ways you think of things. Yes, I like that.
So I got a question for Holly. Do you know about JHipster? And,
I know of it. I have not used it myself.
Okay, because I thought I heard, and I was just trying to reconfirm that there was a JHipster Quarkus. I knew that JHipster was, because Matt Rabel, I think we had talked about it with Matt Rabel, and it's usually like a Spring and maybe like a React, and it's totally opinionated. You create an application and it links those two together. But I just wanted to know if you knew about or if you've ever used, or what your opinions are on that JHipster Quarkus.
I'll be very happy if that's the case, though, because I think so. Just to take a step back, like Quarkus basically implements microprofile in Jakarta EE, right, or some subset of Jakarta EE, and Spring Boot is still super duper popular, and it's a great framework. I have nothing against Spring Boot, but I'm much more in the whole microprofile Java EE camp or Jakarta EE camp, and I hate it when I go to something and they just assume you were doing Spring Boot and don't think you can do anything else. And it'd be really cool to see JHipster, because JHipster is kind of like that too. It's like it's got a great opinionated way of doing things, but it only supports Spring Boot. So what if you want to use something else?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple. We've got a few news topics this week, not this month, I should say, not that many. So for UI and web stuff, we have Ktor 2.0 and 2.01. Whose is that? Is that yours, Josh?
Yeah, I threw that up there. Not that I know really what is new in 2.0 and 2.01, but just to mention that these are new releases. They came out in April. If you're not familiar with Ktor, this is a web framework, basically, that is all about Kotlin. It's created by IntelliJ, and this is it's more for microservices, I would say, not for doing a UI, so to speak, but for doing microservices, getting data and retrieving, updating, whatnot. So very clean, easy to use framework. There looks like there's been quite a bit of work put into it for these last two releases. So if you're interested in using Kotlin for web, this may be something you want to look at.
Is this
with the benefit of hindsight, it's a shame that Kotlin and Kubernetes both start with K, because when I saw Ktor, I assumed it was some, because we've got loads of things to sort of make it easy to get things onto to Kubernetes, and you just sort of substitute a K for a C and you're good, and then
I know. It's nice that with for most Java stuff we have J, so there isn't going to be, and JavaScripters know very well to stay away from that as a J prefix. I guess I haven't seen anything like JavaScript base that starts with a J. So
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That is right. I don't think I know of any JavaScript thing that has like a J. They usually spell out the full name, like we've had JEdit. Log for J, and all the different J things.
Yeah, the convention seems to be .js or just JS at the end.
Yeah. Right, Backbone JS and React JS.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Something I wanted to mention here real quick, since we're talking about Quarkus. Quarkus does support Kotlin as well, it looks like. I've not used it, but if you're a Kotlin fan and you want to get started with Quarkus, it looks like you can go that route as well.
Yeah,
well, I mean, you can't use Quarkus with anything. I mean, any Java.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think Justin Lee, who's a DevRel for Red Hat, I don't know if he promotes those two together. I know he's big into Kotlin, but and he may just do Kotlin and Quarkus together.
Holly, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so I haven't used the Quarkus and Kotlin, but I think because Quarkus is so optimized, if you're going to do something like use a completely different JVM language, it does kind of need to know about it so it can do the right optimizations, and it can kind of, again, is that closed world. But with Quarkus and Kotlin, of course, then you have because we've really monopolized Q. So we've got, I couldn't list them all, but we've got like Quinoa, which is, sort of a web framework. And then we've got like Q with a Q, which is something. And in any case, we're sort of going through the alphabet for like everything that has a Q in it to name our projects after it. But then like if you have a K and a Q, like what do you do? Like CQ? It just doesn't work.
Yes, I can see that. So Quinoa, now this is not something I'm familiar with. So is it actually spelled like the
Yeah, it's spelled exactly like the grain. And what it's sort of trying to do is, because if you're going to do something that has a JavaScript front end and a Java back end, you end up with this real sort of mess in your build, and you have to do all this kind of hand sort of cranking of like, well, I've got my node modules and I've got my NPM and then I've got, my Java, and I have to try and figure out a way to lay it out, and then nothing knows about anything else. So it sort of says, okay, let me get you started. You're going to have your JavaScript and you're going to have your Maven, and let me make it so that your Maven can drive your node in a sensible way. And you can get, I think they haven't quite got the hot reloading for the JavaScript side yet. It's the sort of the next thing they're working on. So like your Java side is like lightning fast reloading, and then the JavaScript isn't. So, that's sort of next. But it,
Gotcha.
I think it's sort of quite a nice, again, just sort of a bootstrapper with some build extras for when you're doing that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, okay. I just added that to the show notes. That's actually what I find to be very interesting is that like Quarkus seems to have built up quite an ecosystem of plugins and all sorts of things, because that's one of the things, right, is that if you want to be able to run your favorite library natively, like you may not be able to unless there's like some optimizations done for the build time before deployment, right? So there's like dozens of Quarkus plugins for like every library that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of like a really interesting part of the Quarkus story is the sort of the native part. So obviously one of the things that's most famous for is the native mode and the native compilation. And, if you're going to use native compilation, it can be kind of hard. And then having Quarkus to have the versions of your libraries that actually play well with native makes a big difference. But all of that work that had to be done to sort of, again, push things to the beginning and do things at build time rather than runtime. Once you've done all that, you actually get a lot of benefit without even having the native runtime. So Quarkus has two modes that it can run in. It can run in natively compiled mode, or it can run just on a JVM. And they're different, but they're both quite good. So the native mode is where you get those really ridiculous figures of like, I start in milliseconds and I have, just 10 megabytes of memory. But even if you're running on the JVM, because we've learned how to do all of those optimizations and, push everything to deploy time, you're still going to be, there's a rule of thumb for how much better it is. And I don't want to say it because I can't remember what it is, but it's a significant fraction of what you were, without Quarkus. You're still going to be faster, and you're still going to be lighter and smaller, and your throughput's going to be probably faster than it is in native. So again, it's a trade-off of if I'm serverless, native is the way to go. If I'm not serverless, actually I should still be using Quarkus because it just makes it better, but I should be using it in JVM mode, and I'm still going to be super optimized.
Right. Is one of the optimizations Docker container size, like they kind of figured all that out for you, and so you don't have to think about how to create a Docker image, and it's fairly small, so you're not like, it seems like when you have your own Spring Boot application, you have to create your own Docker file. You could end up with this beast of an image that just takes long for it to deploy because it's so large. Is that one of the optimizations?
I think so. Yeah, that's one that I haven't played with. So again, I'm sort of going into slightly risky territory. But one of the things that they're sort of thinking about is Kubernetes. And again, Kubernetes doesn't have a great developer experience. We all know that. And so then it's okay. Well, how can I get that more seamless flow from here I am typing away with my Java application to its running on Kubernetes? And so they've got a bunch of extensions that are for exactly that, like your Docker file, but then also your sort of, the next level of, okay, well, let me get my Kubernetes descriptors and that kind of thing so that I can just have it's sort of as easy as possible to sort of have that like remote first development experience where maybe I'm running locally, but I also want to be having a really nice dev experience in Kubernetes.
Right. So is it, do we have a choice between Kubernetes and OpenShift? Because I know Red Hat is very OpenShift, just like, oh, you like Kubernetes? Well, we really think you would like our OpenShift. So, but we still have a choice, right? Like we're not going to be pushed towards OpenShift. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Danno, do I sound better? I'll just, did it right in the middle of the podcast.
Yeah, you were like fading away, and it was just whispers of Kito, which sounds like a wonderful new prog rock band.
It's really funny being someone that likes doing podcasts and public speaking, but is very soft spoken. It's kind of
that's
strange.
Right. That's fine. You were mentioning Quinoa. One of my favorite one of my favorite tweets was like, name a food that sounds like a metal band. And Brian Slenton said quinoa, and I'm like, I can totally picture that. Yeah. Welcome Philadelphia. We are quinoa, high in fiber.
I can definitely see that. All right, so just a couple more news items. We are finally getting close to the release of Jakarta EE 10. So for those few people who haven't heard us talk about Jakarta EE, it's essentially the Eclipse branded reboot of Java EE, I guess you could say. And Jakarta EE 10 is actually the first one with new features. So like first there was like, let's just migrate the code from Java EE to Jakarta EE. Then there was Jakarta EE 9, which is more like, let's change all the package names because Oracle doesn't want Java to be in the package names. Now there's like, hey, we can actually add new features. So Jakarta EE 10 is getting close to release, and a lot of specifications can be looked at now. You want to add some more, Josh? I think you have some.
Yeah,
just to say about this.
Sure, I don't have much more to say other than if you're interested in taking a look at a specific feature of Jakarta EE 10, and Jakarta EE is a large umbrella, lots of different specifications and tech underneath it. So, for instance, if I was interested in looking at JSF, you can go now and download the code for JSF 4, which is part of Jakarta EE 10, and start to play with it. The other thing that is interesting with Jakarta EE 10 is that it's going to be JDK 11 and up, correct?
Right.
Kito? And so I think that's a great thing. And that's one of the things that I really am envious about with Spring, is that they are going JDK 17 and up in their next release, which is Spring 6. So I think it's great to be pushing the developers out of using JDK 8 into 11 and forward. And so I'm really looking forward to Jakarta EE 10.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the versions of Java. Yeah, I mean, we're on 18 now. So if you're using some ancient version of Java, it's time to upgrade.
Although if we blink, we'll be on Java 19.
That is true.
Yes.
There was a New Relic poll that was released recently, and it did describe, or it gave numbers of people that were using the different releases. And it looks more like now the Java 8 has finally shifted to more people are using Java 11, which is great.
Finally.
But then it said that there was a very small amount of people using any JDK release in between 11 and 17 in production, which is probably good. You don't want to be using, in my opinion, JDK 16 or JDK 18 in production, probably, unless you're planning on updating production every 6 months, right? Because you don't want to be stuck there with these shorter term releases. I just wanted to mention that real quick because before we blink, we're going to be on the next release of Java. Right. But if we can get to 17, I think that would be a real good thing.
But I think it's also how you deploy. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're possibly going to say the same thing because it's if you've got continuous delivery sorted out, or if you've even got every 6 months delivery sorted out, then actually you'll be fine with those releases. It's just that, as you say, you don't want to get onto one and then go, we're too scared to release for the next 2 years. So then we don't have any support for this thing because they are, they're production worthy and production ready. They're just not the things that you want to go on to if you never change. But if you can get that sort of, it feels like I was about to use a hamster wheel analogy, which makes it sound really negative, right? That we're just always fighting to upgrade. But actually releases are like brushing your teeth. So, if you do it often, it's not a problem. If you do it once every 2 years, you have a really big problem and you're going to get a root canal.
Yeah, I was going to say like a hamster who's really into fitness. That's good for the hamster. Yeah. But I was going to say the same thing with containerization. Before it was a pain, right? Because you had these images and you had to manually take down one JDK and you didn't realize that was going to work. But if you have staging environments now, you can take your time, evaluate, and just make it a part of the build.
And I think that was the other thing before. It's like you're running a JVM and with some huge app server that had different applications. Now it's like, okay, there's one application. As long as your stuff works in this application, you switch out to JDK, you're good. It doesn't impact a whole bunch of other things. So
I got to tell you that if you miss out on that pattern matching and all that other good stuff, I feel bad for the developers that have to be stuck with like an older version, because some of that new stuff is just great. It's just a wonderful language to be in. And I think the pattern matcher we're on like third iteration, I think. I don't know if anyone knows, but it's almost like going to be official part. We are still at a preview, I believe, on some of the advanced pattern matching.
Yeah.
But I think probably the next release, it's going to be official.
You're making me excited about the next Java.
It is.
Okay. Let's see. JHipster practice. Okay. Kotlin 1.7. Anything you want to say about that, Josh?
I just wanted to mention that 1.7 is out. This is now, if you're looking on the internet, and I'm sounding like an old man looking on the internet, and you're trying to find the latest release of Kotlin and you're used to their old lingo, they used to say, I think they used to call it milestone, but now they're calling them betas. From 1.7.0 forward, they'll be naming their milestones betas instead. This is seems like they've got changes to the builder inference, couple of things with collection functions and stabilizing the definitely non-nullable types. So, as Danno just mentioned with the pattern matching, there's matching with regex at a particular position. So there's some optimizations there. Lots of pretty cool things built up in this release. So it's worth checking out if you're using Kotlin.
It's another language you need to work with. That's cool though.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So I think we also have another good one here, which is Project Loom, right? And the next.
Yes.
So this
Project Loom.
It's been JDK 19, right?
Right. It's kind of been in the laboratory for who knows how many years, but they attached it to a version. So first preview is going to be coming out in JDK 19. And nice. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it is using stack memory to identify what a thread is. And it's a lot faster. And you can run a couple of examples to where, if you're just running a regular executor service with a thread on there, it performs okay. But the way it performs using some of these kind of like native threads, well, it's not really native threads. It's a part of the stack. So it's actually a part of the JVM. And I guess before, what happened is that the JVM would dole out, here, operating system, you run this on a thread. But this is the JVM taking back all of that processing and what the thread state is and things like that. And the carrier threads are the OS threads, but the management of the threads is now pure JVM, and it makes things a whole lot faster. It's going to be fantastic. I think one of the things that they did is try to fit that into the old API, the executor service API. But that means for blocking calls, like for socket calls or even thread sleep, you're encouraged to do that now. Just throw it in your code. Don't worry about it. Don't worry that it blocks because the language is going to handle that for you. So it's going to be one of the great things about it.
But does it actually change like the old API though? Don't you have to use a different API?
I think one of the things they try to do is just try to make it seamless. So all you do is you just use you call executors a new virtual thread. I think the API has changed a few times. So that's all you would have to do is just switch that out, and all of a sudden you're using the virtual thread. So
right,
you probably have to do one or two line changes. But if you want to get the max out of it, there might be some redesigns that you would want to use for that. But they try to minimize that so you can just jump to those new threads right away.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the API now. But what I was getting at is that, like, if you had code which is using the old thread API, it wouldn't automatically use this, and it seems like it doesn't. They've added.
Oh, you mean like a new thread with a new runnable in it?
Yeah. It's not going to like change that to magically run on Loom. But
no. I think you could do a new thread Like, I think you could create a future task with a thread, and that would use an executor service. So I think it's possible.
Gotcha.
But you shouldn't have been running raw threads anyway, since like.
Well, this is true.
Since Josh Block told you in effective Java, which should have been required. Here I am shaming everyone. You shouldn't have been using that anyway.
Probably dating yourself too. So these people are like, what?
That's right.
Ooh, what? Yeah, but it looks like there's like a thread that start virtual thread stuff. And like, for some reason you're not using an executor service, which still would be kind of weird. But you could use there are raw API methods. So, but cool. I'm glad to see that because I think that's probably the longest living feature of the JDK I've seen, or longest incubation period. That would be a good way to put it.
But that's why we all love Java, is that they take care of backwards compatibility as best as they can.
Oh yeah.
And you could upgrade and not have any fear because they did their research and they took their time.
Yeah, and this project we upgraded it. I actually helped start the project like 11 or 12 years ago, and now they moved on to a new platform for most of it, but we're just working with parts which haven't been migrated yet. But really, upgrading the Java code part was trivial. I mean, we switched to a newer JDK. We couldn't go to, I think WebSphere 9 is stuck on JDK 8, I think, so we couldn't really go any further than that. But I think it was like JDK 6 or 7 before. So like we still had to go up a couple versions. And that was not the hard part. that was the trivial part. So yeah, so I really love that the longevity of the platform. Definitely. I think what was it? 25th anniversary just happened. Was it? I think
something like that. I forgot.
There was just a Java birthday very recently.
So. It's enough to make you feel really old.
I know.
Oh, I know. Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, like Java's like a complete adult now. That's weird. Like,
oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, I think it's even more like it's a millennial. Millennial has the mortgage.
Yes. Wow.
Has a beard. Maybe.
That's a good point.
I don't know what gender Java is, but it's an old adult. Yeah.
Yes. So there was one big news item that I thought was worth. Actually, I didn't think of it. Everyone else remembered it. I did not. But Broadcom is buying. I don't know if it's complete yet, but they're buying VMware. So VMware, in addition to having, pioneered at least mass market virtual machines, they also have a history of spitting out and sucking back up Spring. So
I feel bad for Spring. Like I think they're respected very highly within the Java community, but outside of that, I don't know. And I fear for them that, with this, changing of hands frequently, are they going to be taken care of? And that's one of the things I worry about because they're good. They're a great group. And, they do a lot of things for Java. I mean, I don't think Java would be even as popular without Spring, to be honest with you.
Definitely. Yeah, and the deal is for $61 billion, which is a pretty big purchase for Broadcom. So Broadcom's primary business is semiconductors, right? Does anyone know what sort of products they actually have? So I know the company, but it doesn't touch my world very often. So
I don't know.
I had to go look it up. It was sort of broad what?
Oh, that's right. Broadcom.
Well, what did you find out when you looked it up? Because
I think pretty much I read the same Wikipedia page as you, so it was Fabulous Semiconductors. But then as well, they've been doing sort of a series of acquisitions recently.
Okay.
So they bought Computer Associates a few years ago.
Oh, they did. Another company of random products that I seem to run across sometimes, but interesting. So they bought CA, huh?
I did receive an email today because I'm on the VMware email list, a customer email.
Oh, no.
And there's a quick rundown about what's going on. So if you want, I can read just a paragraph that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
It says Broadcom is one of the world's largest technology companies and a leader in the hardware, infrastructure, data center, and network innovation. Following the closing of the transaction, VMware will become the software platform and brand for Broadcom, incorporating Broadcom's existing infrastructure and security software solutions as part of the VMware portfolio. Which is, so they're definitely looking to do the hardware side and then the software side with VMware. And it does say a little bit later on that the transaction is expected to close during Broadcom's fiscal year 2023, which is the November 2022 to October 2023 timeframe.
Interesting. And I did notice they also own Symantec, which I didn't realize.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and then I guess Symantec is a lot smaller than VMware because they only cost $10 billion. Interesting.
I'll have two.
Yes. Fascinating. So it's just intriguing. I was thinking though, if they do semiconductors and stuff, maybe there's some sort of, Apple-ish play that since I don't really understand their core business, I can't speculate on it. But, that really, especially with Apple Silicon, that's really been a brilliant move on their part to design and, do everything. And if Broadcom actually does manufacturing as well and can do software stuff, there may be some cool things they can do that no one else can really do that well. So
yeah, that's true. Kind of taking things into their own control so that they can control and optimize and make things even better for their hardware with the software stack. That does make sense.
Huh. Yeah, so I guess we'll see what happens. Now, the one thing I didn't quite get I wasn't paying attention, I guess. When VMware got Spring back, did they buy Pivotal Labs? Or did Pivotal Labs get rid of Spring and give it back to VMware?
And I'm not quite sure exactly how it took place.
So I was just thinking about Pivotal Labs the other day. So yeah, it's interesting with open source. It's like you really need a steward, right? Red Hat actually is probably the best example of a company that's been able to make money off of open source and still really be an open source company,
Yeah, I mean, they really walk the walk. They do, yeah. Since moving, I've sort of seen, it's definitely not just talking the talk,
Yeah. So it's almost like they need, why can't they just go back to being Spring Source, back to the day before VMware bought them? So I guess we'll see what happens. But I have a sneaky suspicion that regardless, they will land somewhere. Because they've done just a phenomenal job with just moving Java forward and constantly pushing.
I don't think that there's any. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think there's any doubt that no matter what happens, Spring is here to stay. It's going to either go somewhere else and land on its feet, or it's going to stay with Broadcom and just get even better. So I think I am a Jakarta EE person, but I still do think Spring is very important, and Spring even does use a lot of Jakarta EE. So it's a great great community, I should say, to have under the Java umbrella, and I'm looking forward to the future of Spring. I think it's going to be great no matter where it goes.
Yeah. Okay, so we are getting short on time. Do you want to talk about the link you have here, Josh, for the sip of Java script?
Just a quick mention. I'm not sure how many are familiar with dev.java, but this is a website that, was probably released about a year ago now by the Java team and Oracle. And one of the contributors named Billy Coronado. He is really active in the Java community. He comes out with some great blog posts every once in a while. They try and catch you up on features happening in Java. One of the latest of his is called Scripting with Java, and he goes through and explains how to do single file source code compilation and running Java just as a script using shebang files and whatnot. So this is a good post, and I just kind of wanted to highlight it so you could take a look at some of his other stuff. One of the other things he's done recently is to outline the newer features of JavaDoc. And I was reading that, and I did not know that half of this stuff existed. Yeah. And it really has been modernized in the past few versions of Java.
I did not know that.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, so it's really interesting.
Yeah, because if I saw a post about JavaDoc, I'd just skip over. I would assume better. Yeah.
Who docs, right?
That's worth knowing. Yeah, and Billy's great. I love Billy.
Yeah, Billy is great. So here's the thing about Billy. People should give him hell for not having anything in his coffee mug. I think he's living a lie. Whenever he takes a sip out of his mug, there's nothing in there. And everyone's teasing. Everyone should tease him. That's hilarious. Every time he drinks his cup, it's like, hey, there's nothing in there. What are you doing? So related to this, I was teaching a Java course, a beginning Java course, which is tons of fun. And they were like, they asked the question, and they asked a lot of questions. And one of the interesting things is one of the questions was, can I run Java code without compiling it? And they always ask the questions that is yes now, but it wasn't very long ago that the answer was no. Yeah, you had to use Java C and then run Java. But they asked it at a particular point in time where, guess what? The answer is yes right now. So there are a lot of things that Java has now that they just didn't have in the immediate past. One of them was creating a jar file. I don't know if you've taken a look at the jar command line. Yikes. There are a lot of new things, and you don't actually even have to create a manifest file anymore. You just say what the main class is, and it's all in a one single command line sort of thing. So that's also been enhanced as well. So this is great. This is why teaching a beginning course can sometimes humble you, because you realize a few things have changed since 2005.
You get so used to doing something a hard way, don't you, that you don't even notice that you're doing it a hard way, and you don't look to see if there's an easier way.
That's a great point.
That's true.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Danno, the beginning Java course, were were these young people, or was it just a team that was just new and different?
I think varying ages.
Java?
So I think half young, half a little bit older, and because they are transferring from another different language. So I'll get adults. Yeah.
Gotcha.
One of my favorite ones, my favorite story was these were C# programmers, and they were mandated that they have to do stuff in Java. And they were a great group, but they were trash talking me throughout these 3 days. And they were like, oh, what do we have to do this? C# could do this, and we've had this for a while. And they were just giving me all. Anyway, so one day I was telling you about the functional programming stuff, and I'm like, this is the way flat map and map works. And they were silent. They were like, and I'm like, what's wrong? Why is everyone quiet all of a sudden? And they were like, we don't have that in C#. And I'm like, well, that's because your language is terrible and it's shouldn't be used in production. Of course, I'm being a jerk. Yeah, I know I'm being a jerk. And I said, you know what? I'm just being a jerk. I bet you have it, but it's under a different name, map and flat map. And we found out it was called select many and select. Select many is equal to flat map, and select is equal to map. That was one of my favorite beginning Java stories, because sometimes I'll get people coming in from a different language, and makes it even more fun, especially if you get a group like that. It teases you all throughout.
That is great. I haven't done C# in a long time, but I was a year or two ago. I was looking at a C# code base. I was just trying to find find the code that was generating what I was consuming. I'm like, where the hell is this?
Someone was telling me, hey, what's the difference between Java and C#? I said, well, you could easily convert Java to C# if it has a small letter, capitalize it. If it's capitalized letters, shrink it, and then you get C#. And I was just like, really? I'm like, no, not really. But I mean, as far as the looks go, that's a joke I usually have.
I haven't done it for years either, but when I was doing it, the thing that always caught me out was the lack of checked exceptions. And so anytime because a lot of people who I really respect say Java shouldn't have had checked exceptions and they cause all sorts of problems. But whenever I work in a language without the checked exceptions, what I find is that unless you go and read the docs for the thing that you're using, you don't handle the errors, and then they just propagate right up and crash your application for something really innocuous. I'm like, is this really better?
And so now since I do more functional programming, we have actual types, which are maybe bubbling up in Java more and more. There's a library called VMWare, VAVR, which I think I talked about in a previous session, but they have types called try. They have types called either. So it's either a pass or a fail. So it's kind of like a checked exception, but it's a part of your method, and you just have to be forced to think about it. And that's a great thing. And I remember, I don't know what year it was, 2007, the anger against checked exceptions. And I was team I like checked exceptions because it forces me to think about something. And everyone at the time wanted to do runtime exceptions, but I'm thinking this is just a problem that's just waiting to blow up in production. Well, why would you choose this sort of thing? So, but yeah, there's been a vast debate on that.
That's interesting because I'm generally more of the unchecked exception person, but I do think there's room for checked ones. I just don't want them all the time. So it's like I want them sometimes, especially if I want to force the caller to deal with it. But in situations where it is something that you can't recover from anyways, I'm like, it's unchecked.
If you're parsing a string to an int, that's cause for problems here and there, depending on, what they do with their data or whatever, and how are you going to handle that problem, particularly if you're bringing something in from a database. If someone has write access to a database that you're not aware of, and, they put in a string somewhere instead of a number, there it goes. You got an error in production. So, yeah, you don't, those kind of things I like. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. My name is Dan. All right.
So, we are running out of time, but I did want to ask Holly a couple things, and my first thing is I was looking at your bio, and you worked at the IBM Garage, which I had never heard of before. So I was just curious, what was that like? What did it do?
It sounds like an indie band.
Yes.
That was really sort of almost the intention was we wanted to, well, it had sort of an interesting journey as well, but it started out, we were thinking IBM has not traditionally been super appealing to startups. Can we fix that? How do we fix that? We have to fix that by operating more like a startup. So, what I say I wasn't there at the beginning, but they started in San Francisco, and they made a team that was going to use things like extreme programming, pair programming, so lean, all of those methodologies. So we had lean startup, we had extreme programming, and then we had design thinking. And now those two get put together all the time. But at the time it was quite innovative to sort of put those three together. And so we sort of started out, we were a consultancy, and it started out being quite sort of web application oriented, quite cloud oriented. How can we help you take advantage of the cloud? And then we realized that the way that we were doing things actually made a lot of sense for a lot of other domains too. So if you're going to be doing AI or something like that, some of those sort of lean startup ideas of failing fast make a lot of sense. And some of those design thinking ideas of thinking, well, instead of starting with the technology and going, this is such a shiny technology, we must use it. What problem are we trying to solve? Let's try and figure out what problem we're solving first. And then maybe actually the shiniest, most exciting technology isn't the right thing, because what's actually going to make the most difference for our users is some really boring process modification over here. So let's put our resources into that. So it ended up spreading quite widely within IBM. So we had sort of 17 garages around the world, and then it sort of a lot more of IBM started working in that way as well. But one of the things that surprised us was because we started out with the intention of appealing to startups, but because we worked in such a cool way and it was such a great team, a lot of our IBM customers who were not startups said, IBM is quite a large company and they've managed to work in this really exciting, interesting, incredibly productive way. Can you tell us how you did that? Because we'd quite like to do it as well. So we ended up working with some of the largest customers to sort of do that transformation, that cultural change, to say the way you delivered software 10 years ago isn't going to work for the cloud. And to be honest, it's probably not going to work for anything. And it's slow and it's expensive and your quality isn't as good as it could be. So let's bring it up to date.
Kind of cool. It's like you became like a management consulting company, but not for management, for like product development.
Yeah, sort of. I think one of the things that was really powerful about it was definitely doing rather than saying. So, because I think it's quite easy to sort of get consultants in and, they write you like a report this big telling you why your development is wrong and you go, that's nice. And then you carry on doing what you were doing. But because we were doing pair programming, we would try and mix up our pairs, and we'd try and make sure that whoever we were working for, they brought their developers in too. And then they could see that we were building the thing and we built it in a fraction of the time they'd expected it to take. And they had helped build it. And so then it meant that they could sort of carry it forward, and they knew how to maintain the thing because they built it, and they knew how to do those cultural things as well because they'd been a part of the process. They hadn't been just sort of a spectator going, wow, that was efficient.
That's cool. Very nice. So you were there for how long?
About 5 years.
Okay. And that's where you were before the Red Hat transition?
Yeah, I had sort of a little period of about a year in IBM corporate strategy as well, which was quite interesting. So it was not very codey, but I think it's quite good as technical people to sort of get the mix. And so some of the time you want to be hands-on and playing in the code, but then some of the time you're going to want to go, well, what's driving this? What are the business things that I maybe don't have visibility of if I'm too in the code? And what does make IBM strategy? So it was interesting.
Cool. And I guess my last question is sort of alluded to this, but culturally, what's different jumping over from IBM to Red Hat?
IBM does a lot of open source, and I think it does a lot more open source than it's given credit for. Mm-hmm. But certainly it's nothing like the open source culture in Red Hat, which is it permeates everything. So the code is open, but then there's so much sort of commitment to community support as well, which I hadn't really expected. And when they make vendor decisions, for example, that's often one of the things that they want to look for is, we prefer to have open source all the way in our internal stack as well.
Nice.
Which is really interesting. And it's very, like all the sort of it's very technical as well, sort of all the way through. Mm-hmm. So the management are very technical and project management are very technical. And, I'll sort of be on a call and the project manager will be sort of explaining how to debug some problem. And I'm like, that's sort of an extra skill that I didn't necessarily expect you to have in your tool chest because you're also doing all of these project management things.
That's really cool. Okay. All right. I want to move on to picks, but Josh, Danno, got any other topics for Holly before we move on?
Any more topics? No, I don't think so.
Holly, anything in particular that you wanted to bring up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. All right. So I did mention this actually before. Holly, did you get to pick a pick? Pick a pick?
I did not get it. I think I
what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
Something that might be obscure that others would enjoy, some knowledge that you have that others may not know. Yeah. Some tech thing that you like.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be related to programming, just something you think is cool that you want to share.
Yeah, it could be something.
even a
I
TV show
totally
or something.
didn't read the homework.
Yeah, no, and I forgot to tell you.
Or you know what? We could start, and then Holly can
you all start
while we're talking, and
I'll frantically think.
I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that works. I'll start with my pick.
All right.
So yeah, I actually went through this exercise when we started. I was like, what should I pick? And I decided to pick this little hard drive I have. It's the Rocket XTRM-Q external SSD drive, which
wow, that was my nickname in college.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
XTRM-Q.
Let's see if we can find it. So here's the drive. It's a little SSD drive, and I think it comes in varying sizes. And I apparently can't point a camera. Okay, there it is. And
look at me! I'm upside down. Hi, everybody.
Yes, there you are. Yeah. So that's the drive, and I think it comes in different sizes. I think this one's 4 gigabytes. Sorry, 4 terabytes. Excuse me. So it's my little. I use this app called Super Duper on my Mac to do a clone of my drive, which is a 2 terabyte drive. So maybe this is 2 terabyte. This might be 2 terabyte. But this little drive is just really nice. I use it just for backing up for the clone backup. I use it something else for Time Machine. And it's so portable that my plan now is that whenever I go any trip, I'm bringing this thing with me. If for some reason my machine crashes, this thing, since it's an SSD, it should be fast enough to boot off of. It's obviously not as fast as the internal one, but should be enough to deal if I have some major issue. So that's my pick. The links are in the show notes, but it's just it's not cheap, but it's fast and small. So
cool.
All right. So Josh, what you got for us?
Okay, sorry, I was taking myself off mute here. You don't want to hear all the background noise here. So I'm probably the only one who's new to this, but I just discovered a newer way to run containers called Podman. And this is definitely something that should be of interest to anyone who is currently using Docker. It is basically a daemonless container engine for developing, managing, and running OCI containers on your Linux system or Mac or whatever. And basically, it's the good thing can be that Docker can equal Podman. So if you know anything about Docker, you can pretty much drop Podman in and go at it. All the commands are basically the same. Everything runs the same, except one good thing about Podman is you can have a Podman server that does not have to run as root. So that is pretty interesting. I do like that. And I think this is a Red Hat thing, is it not?
Certainly there's Red Hat support for it.
Yeah, Red Hat support for it. Okay. So yeah, it's something you should take a look at if you're using Docker. It does have some nice features.
And I think this was one of the reasons why Kubernetes decided not to be specific to Docker. And I don't know the relationship. I don't know, Holly, if you know, because there's a container D, and I guess container D is the abstraction that covers all containers, or something like that. Because I think Kubernetes did that to where their container runtime can run Docker, of course, and there was a controversy that everyone thought, oh no, they're pulling Docker support, but that wasn't it. That was just they were abstracting away the engine, and so there was no longer any more Docker specific engine, but more of an abstracted engine that can run Podman or Docker or anything else like that. But I think I may have butchered that and not have the complete story. I don't know, Holly, if you know.
Yeah, that sounds roughly right. But I think, and I think you're right as well, that I think we tend to be a bit sort of sloppy in our language sometimes, a bit, like Kleenex for tissue. We sort of use Docker as a synonym for container, and actually the community went to something that was a bit more portable and abstract a while ago, and we kind of need to catch up in our language.
Right. Yeah.
Good point. And I think the underlying, important to point out that the underlying format is just OCI, right?
Yes.
So, I like Docker actually quite a bit, but I know at the end of the day, it's not the end all be all. It's just a tool to generate something that I can then deploy somewhere else. So.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting with with Podman, just like anything else, I'm sure you can imagine, they've got very similar command line interface to Docker. So, I mean, if you're very familiar with Docker and you want to stay that way, you can pretty much come right over to this. Same thing with Docker Desktop. Podman does have some interfaces that look very similar to Docker Desktop and make it a little bit easier. Yeah, very. And since it's all open source and such, people have created things. There are lots of things out on GitHub that you can use for managing Podman as well as Docker containers. So yeah, it's just another option out there, and I thought I would put it out there.
Right. There's another one called Rancher Desktop that I've used because I was getting frustrated with Docker. And I forgot what kind of images they use, but I think they use something else. They have something called Nerd Cuddle or Nerd CTL in order to manage things. I was impressed by it. So if you feel like there's a limitation with your Docker experience, something else you could try, and that's Rancher Desktop. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Nice.
Cool. So I think, Danno, your pick is next.
Right. Check this out. And Holly, I don't know if you saw this episode or if you maybe already knew about it. Did you know about Period, Holly, in GitHub? Mm-mm. So if you go to a GitHub, and this was my pick, a couple of sessions ago, a couple of podcasts ago. If you hit Period on a GitHub repo, then it opens up a Visual Studio Code. So just as a reminder, we had talked about that in a previous session. Well, I'm going to take that and go a little bit further. Now, this is another service. So you take that GitHub address, so like mine, github.com, Dino Hossa, and let's say a Java TDD or whatever. And then right before GitHub, you type in gitpod.io. And again, this is going to take you to another different service. It's not part of GitHub. But what this will do is it will take you to an editor where you have an editor there. So just like what you had before, but it can run Docker Compose, and you get a full development, and I think a better development environment. What was really exciting about this is that you can run a Docker Compose and you can run your Docker images on there. Because one of the things that I was getting nervous about was all my workshops. And when it comes to the new Mac M1s, that's using an ARM architecture, ARM 64. And most Docker images are AMD 64. And for some of the classes I was teaching, like the Kafka Confluent one, they only have AMD 64. And I'm now reaching the point that, these aren't going to work. So you get like a standard AMD 64 environment development. You can run Docker images and you could expose those ports so you can just service them, get service to them on the internet. So really fantastic. And if push comes to shove and you want to host your own, you can take that same technology and deploy that onto a Kubernetes cluster and manage that yourself.
I'm just thinking like this is like what all of my clients should be using whenever they use contractors now, essentially.
Yeah, totally. You get 50 free hours. I mean, I was like, somebody has to get paid at some point. And I was like, tell me where the money is. So don't try to hide it. I had a hard time finding that, but it was like 50 free hours on there. But then they start charging you to use that. But again, you can also, you'll pay for it through, if you want to host your own Kubernetes, and you can take their technology and host it there. So I think it's a good business model.
Yeah. And what I like about this is, because with a lot of clients, they're like, okay, we have to provision you a VM or reduce some funky thing. And then you get like this crappy Windows.
Right. This one is just a URL.
Right. This would be like they can manage the container, right? And then you can actually use a real IDE or the browser IDE.
Right. So I would tell them just run this, and there's just a menu, run this Docker Compose, and you get all the servers and services that you need. And then you could just say, expose this port, and they'll create a server port for you that you can access in the outside world. It's fantastic.
That's nice.
I cried a little bit, I think. I mean, those kind of happy tears that just like drops down whenever you find something really exciting. Yeah. Well, I had that with Quarkus, just to let you know, Holly. Like that deserved a Dan Teardrop Award as well. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there. We should have the Dan Teardrop Award. Excellence in software. Things that make me cry.
Maybe we should start that. I think we should do that.
That Dan's Happy Tier Award. That's right.
Yeah.
Or just a Happy Tier Award.
I think the Happy Tier Award. We can even make little trophies you can get with a little tier, you know. I think we may be onto something.
Yeah, because it's what you want. You know, you want that kind of joyful astonishment and delight when you find something that you're just like, my life
I love
is
those
better
words. Yeah,
now.
Joyful delight. Yeah, those are the things that. Yeah, that's great.
That's right. It's kind of what we're all here for, right? Like ideally we get paid. But
well, yes, we want to actually have fun doing it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So, Holly, did you think of one while we were talking about our?
I did, yeah, but unfortunately, I'm not sure it meets the joy criteria. But it's so useful that I'm going to mention it anyway.
Then, yeah.
Well, no, it doesn't bring me. Well, sort of, it doesn't bring joy. It brings confidence.
Confidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I thought you were going to say anger and frustration.
No.
Confidence is a good word.
Yeah, because so my pick, it's not a new thing, but it's not super widely used. So I think it's still worth mentioning, which is packed contract testing. And so that's it. It sort of combines something like your Wiremark and something like your Rest Assured. So if they were sort of in the same tool, and it means that the mocks on one side are the exact same as the functional tests on the other side, so that rather than having one team write functional tests that bear no resemblance to how their microservice is being used, and the other team have this mock that bakes in all their assumptions and isn't actually like what's happening at the other end, because there's a piece of JSON which is shared between the two teams, you get a lot more. You can get hopefully more towards that, what we were talking about earlier, of like, actually, I'm going to deploy this more than every 2 years because my deploys are safe and easy and I have the confidence. The lack of joy part is that testing gives you confidence, but I don't think it ever really gives that much joy. And with packed, you have to talk to the other team, which of course you never want to do that, right? You sort of want to be like, my product is perfect. All defects are the responsibility of those cowboys over there. Mm-hmm. And what packed does is sort of force some of those conversations by saying, could we maybe agree on a JSON that says what this does? And everybody's like, no.
Oh, this is great. I can't wait to use this. Yeah. It brings me joy. But it reminds me of,
so useful.
It reminded me of a tweet that I saw. Someone was like, I try to bring some developers together and to have, communication of what the software should do. And we're going to make this a standard part. But this manager said that got pushback because a lot of the engineers that is under him were just like, I didn't effing get into this to go talk to people. Let me just write code and just leave me out of this. And I'm like, what a horrible situation to be in. Just like, I don't know, maybe I've assumed too much, that I've always assumed software is a human endeavor. And you can't escape from it unless you're writing your own like video game. In that case, you just stay at home and write open source. But, it seems for work, and even in open source, you got to interact with people. But yeah, I know, tough.
Right.
Yeah, it's the hardest part of the job for sure.
Yeah,
I know,
especially for us more. Generally, you find like I think for a lot of developers, it's hard because we tend to like to sit there and stare at the computer screen.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I think everybody requires that space to do work. I mean, I'm not saying that like take your 20 hours or 10 hours to develop something, but then you're going to have to communicate that. And what's even worse is you're going to get criticism for it. And that's really, really the hard part. Yeah. You have to accept criticism, but you also have to know how to how to dispense with the criticism in a very good way. Because you could just say things like, like the word you. I think that was a pick from before. Using the word you is very pointy, very stabby. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. And so offering criticism is best done like, this particular software doesn't have this feature, like direct it over to the software. Don't direct it over to the person. But like human communication is so tough in this industry and just all around in general.
Yeah. And I still use the royal we a lot, even though I know it's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, we is good.
But hold on a second.
And we'd like to think we're tough. Everyone's like, oh no, I'm not weak here. I could take it. No, I think depending on who you are, there's going to be a time where just like you're going to throw down because someone used the word "you" too much and it sounds accusatory.
Yeah, no, I think all of us are like that. We're all veterans here, and then like still sometimes you're like, oh man, they don't like the way I did that.
I know. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yes, and then they're like, oh, and they're right too. Damn it.
Yeah.
All right, so great picks. All these will be in the show notes at stackedpodcast.com. We just wanted to mention there's some other Pubhouse Network podcasts. There's Breaking in Open Source, Off Heap, and Java Pubhouse. And I guess Off Heap and Java Pubhouse are frequent. Breaking in Open Source seems to be like once every 6 months or so. Josh.
Not quite as often.
Yeah, but they're both out there. And obviously you can watch, is it Off Heap and see Danno get COVID? Is that the...
That's right. Yeah, there's a particular time. I don't know. And again, I was doing so many other risky behaviors. That's why I told Matt. Matt was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'm a jerk, and I'm like, "Dude, there's no way." Like, if it was just that, and like I masked everywhere else, then I'd be like, "Darn it, Matt, look what you did." Right. But no, I was at bars and I was like in venues. I was at restaurants, and I was even going around like the main part of the conference. Hey, everyone, without a mask. So I only wore a mask sparingly. So there's, who knows.
I'm still going to blame the podcast because it's funny.
It would be funny if we edited the video and just made it slow motion at the one point where you thought you got it and then blew up your face real big or something.
The spray just ends up around my head.
Right. And then they can cut back to Matt, put like a arrow pointing at him or something,
That's right. Yeah.
All right, so we've got I just wanted to mention some events coming up. The Eurostar conference is in Copenhagen, June 7th through 10th, which probably will happen before this gets published, but if not, you can go see it. Otherwise, hope it was a great conference. Agile 2022 is going to be in Nashville. I'm guessing this is Tennessee. Is there a Nashville, Texas, or is this a typo?
Wow, they're being agile. You think like they're rigid with Tennessee, but they're being very flexible and shifting that to another state altogether.
Yes, I'm guessing this is really in Nashville, Tennessee. But that is July 18th through 20th.
Or they fly into like Nashville, Tennessee. No, you idiot. It's Nashville, Texas. Got to be agile and go fly to Texas now.
Danno, are you still doing No Fluffs?
I am. I'll be at UberConf. And ArchConf is coming in about 2 weeks as well, but it's probably too late for that. But I'm doing ArchConf there as well and giving some good talks. Hopefully good talks.
So there's Great Lakes Software Symposium. I guess that's in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that is the one. Yeah, there it is. It's 10 through 12, but before that there was going to be a ArchConf.
Okay, gotcha.
ArchConf Central.
And UberConf is July 12th through 15th.
That's the big flagship one. Mm-hmm.
KCDC, who put that one in?
Billy. That's Billy Carando, who we were just talking about. So he and his team there. It's trying to build up a nice big conference there in Kansas City.
I have heard.
Has nothing to do with heavy metal. It sounds like KCDC.
It does.
But it is out of Kansas City, and August 8th through 10th.
Yeah, I've heard of this before. I heard their conferences are really good, actually.
Yeah.
But I have not been there. I've been to Kansas City, but I have not been there for a conference. So cool. Okay. And let's see what else we got. Java 1 is theoretically coming, although I still haven't seen an official announcement. Has anyone seen an official announcement?
Yeah, I think it was just dropped. Holly, do you come to the States often for conferences?
Yeah, I haven't been for a while because COVID. But yeah,
right.
I used to come across mostly for Java 1. I come across for Java 1 and for the IBM conferences, and not.
You find yourself doing it kind of like DevRel as well, even though you're more senior engineer and into the code, but you find yourself having to do customer facing stuff every now and then?
Yeah, I mean, having probably isn't the right word, but like, because I enjoy it, and I think when you're working on a product, you've got to be talking to the people who are using it, because that's how you figure out what you need to fix.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
One thing I have heard about Java 1 recently, not specifically about Java 1, but about Oracle Cloud World, is that it is going to be at Caesar's Palace, I believe, in Las Vegas. And I think that they had mentioned Java 1 is going to be at the same venue.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% certain on that, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's.
I don't, like I said, I don't mind interacting with people, but I don't want to interact with Oracle people. I'm just kidding.
Were we just talking?
Editor, cut that part out. No, I'm just kidding.
So that'll be in Vegas, 16th to 22nd. I submitted a session to Oracle Cloud World, since there's no Java 1 announcement yet, so we'll see what happens.
All right, cool.
And JCon Online is going to be September 20 to 23rd. It's actually from a user group in Germany. Richard Fitchner, who was on here a few episodes ago, is one of the organizers for that. So I'm actually going to be speaking at that one. And they were going to do one in person, but they're postponing it till next year. So that'll just be an online one. Connect.tech is back. That is the web JavaScript mobile conference from the DevNexus folks. It's in Atlanta, Georgia, November 8th through 10th. Java Summit IL will be November 22nd in Tel Aviv, Israel, which I was thinking about submitting for that one because I've never been to Israel before. I thought that'd be kind of cool. But
it's highly interesting, and hopefully you don't go during like a particular holiday because everything is closed. And I have an interesting story behind that, but I had like military people come up with fish, bread, and beer because all the staff was unavailable, and they knocked on my door heavily armed, providing me fish and beer. So it was kind of interesting because I landed during a religious holiday, and that's what they do. They close everything up. And what you'll enjoy is they typically don't have American breakfast. They have like Israeli breakfast. They eat healthy, and that drives me nuts. I don't want to eat healthy. I want to eat an American breakfast. And so I'm like, where is it? It was right here. See those fruits, veggies, you get tuna or whatever you want. I don't want to eat like that. That's not breakfast. Where's mine? And of course, bacon is hard to find because that's not kosher. But
yes, so, I imagine.
But yeah, breakfast is just do as the Israelis do. Eat a little bit healthier, at least for a little bit.
I think a lot of the world eats healthier for.
Yeah, but you know what? I stayed at the Daniel Hotel when I was in Israel. So I'm like,
you have your own hotel.
I had my own hotel. It was fantastic. Yeah, that was really good.
Nice.
It's important. Maybe you'll find a Kito hotel.
Yeah, maybe one day. I'm just annoyed because I realize there's a famous Australian artist named Kito. So now if you search for Kito, you'll find her instead of me. So
yeah, NPR has Maria Hinojosa and other few Hinojosas. I think President of Mexico was a Felipe Calderon Hinojosa.
Okay, cool.
So those are and criminals. My last name, tons of criminals out there. So if I do a Google search, just dudes with little placards on they're getting their mug shot. I'm like, darn it, I need to best represent. All right,
nice. All right, one last conference, Spring 1, December 6th through 8th. The CFP is open, and that's in San Francisco or online. So they're doing a hybrid. Okay, cool.
That's going to be at Moscone, I believe.
Yeah.
Holly, are you in like the London area? So you take part in, if you do, and you take part of mostly the London stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, recently I've been at like QCon London and DevOps UK.
Yeah. How is DevOps UK? I've not been to that one.
It's good. It's nice. It's in this spectacular venue that used to be like kind of for like agricultural fairs or something. And so it's sort of got this like nice big open glass ceiling and that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah, I've not been to a DevOps in a while. I'd love to go back to I still love the Belgian one. It's still such a great conference.
And it seems like And like most of the dev boxes, the venue is important. Like there's always some interesting characteristic. Like they don't do it in the most standard way. Because like I think Belgium is the one that started it, and they have like a movie theater venue cool. for that. And so there's always something unique and interesting, it sounds like.
What were you going to say, Holly?
Yeah, and just I think one of the nice things about DevOps is it's so community oriented. So it's not professional conference organizers; it's us who are doing it.
Right.
Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, cool.
All right. Well, it looks like we've come to the end of another long episode of Stacked. so Holly, thank you for staying with us for the whole time.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. That was amazing. That's great.
And super interesting. That was really great having you. And thank you everybody for listening, and the 5 of you that watched the YouTube stream. Thanks for watching. And we will talk to you next month.
All right. For all Americans, have a good holiday.
Yep. Indeed. Goodbye.
Cool.